What up, gamers? We are back with some more modern action. I hope everybody is doing well today. We are coming back from Commander Sealed over the weekend. If you guys wanted to see all the footage from that, we did a little vlog up there. There was 255 players. We got 19th overall for playing Commander, so it was a lot of fun. But now we're getting into it. I've been basically building blue decks over the course of Modern after Nadu was banned. I've been kind of going, all right, do I want to play Murktide? Do I want to play Control? Do I want to just play like is it Prowess list? Where do I want to go? And I decided to just try out the Jeskai Control. And I sat down at the local LGS, and my opponent does a turn 1 Venerated Rot Priest, and you have no idea how excited I was to see this. I mean, partly because I am an Infect player at heart. You guys have if you have not seen the signed Infect deck that I've got, there's a short of it. You can see it up there. I have the tattoo of the Phyrexian symbol. Like, I'm all in on Infect. So it's like I see this, I am ecstatic. But also, like, I know that this is going to be a very difficult match for the Infect player, but also not just because of the removal spells that I have access to, but also because of my knowledge of Infects makes this exceptionally hard for the Infect player. Because I have piloted the deck so much, I know so many more lines than the average Infect player, or somebody picking it up for the first time, or picking it up for the first time in a while. We're starting off with a discharge, get some energy, pay the energy into it, so it's like, hey, you have a chance to respond before it resolves, and then I can tell you how much energy I'm going to pay into it. It's like a weird little loophole with galvanic discharge there. Apparently I forgot to put the image up, but that's okay. So in order to do that, Venerated Rot Priest, anytime it gets targeted by a spell, including your own spells, you get to give your opponent a poison counter. So getting a couple of them out early is nice. But also, we're seeing a Noble Hierarch as an additional one. Not something we're really worried about. Because it's the Infect like this, we know it's going to be like the blue-green Infect version. So Blighted Agent are things we need to worry about. We could also be kind of on our radar. Distortion Strike is running around here. So like there's things we're already kind of ticking off in our brains of what to be worried about. Some players are testing out Sultai Infect, Golgari Infect, especially in a meta very heavily favored with energy because of getting access to the pro-red, pro-white side of things is really, really good. It doesn't really do much against like board wipes, and the control list is very board wipe heavy. Flage is our top end as our kind of like big damage thing, but single target stuff, we're running a lot of Galvanic Discharge in there. But Wrath of Skies is the big like, hey, this is our board wipe side of things. But it's really interesting with the control list. If you're considering picking it up, it's such a passive play style, and coming from like the different decks up to this one, you can build it a couple different ways. There's some slight fluctuations within lists, but I'm running 2 blue-white Surveil lands, 2 red-blue Surveil lands, and 1 red-white Surveil lands. So I'm running the most Surveil lands that I've ever run in a list, and it's slow. Right, you sit there and you slow down a bit and you try to adapt and figure things out. But I'm also running like the filter land here that you can see. But it's like I'm very much of like I am perfectly fine with whatever you want to do, because by the time I get up to enough to cast Wrath of Skies, I'll have enough energy, I'll blow up things, and so this is a great little just let's wipe the board of what you're doing. We've taken a little bit of chip damage, There's no Ink Moth Nexus out. There's no Blighted Agent or anything like that. So we're feeling okay. So this list that we're seeing is a little bit older of a list. Like it's got like if you were paying attention through some of the stuff, there are some cards in here that were more favorable in the pre-Modern Horizons 3 versions of it. I guess even pre-Modern Horizons 2, it was more favorable in Modern Horizons 2 with some of the cards. We'll talk about it if they come up, but some of the like protection spells in particular is what we're referring to here. But yeah, the Jeskai Control is very passive, depending on the way you want to build it. I've built mine as a very much sit back, respond, react, do things like that. I'm only doing 2 Force of Negations main board. I'm having 1 Supreme Verdict main board. Part of that also is specifically to the meta that is at my shop and the way that I'm adapting my deck to deal with it. I'm not running Pyroclasms in my list currently. Part of that is we don't have the energy list running around. I feel like I have enough board wipes. I don't really need it. We have a lot of ways hardened scales and other creature-based decks Murktide and things where Pyroclasm doesn't really do anything in that. So it's I'll find better slots for there, but we're in this land go mode here, and that's a lot of what Jeskai Control list is for me, especially the way it's set up now. Is just okay, pass. I'll do things and react when I need to. It is very much a how well can you get stop the threats from coming down. So we dealt with the Venerated Rot Priest, but there's a elf coming out here. So that's kind of the initial stuff. Now, this right here is something that me as an Infect player understands watching the way that this player took their turn. By attacking me with the Dryad Arbor, that's giving me information that their hand does not have the pump spells that they need. Because otherwise, they would have kept both of them back to respond to me trying to kill the elf, right? You want to be able to have, think about the way the Wizards battle would go, where you're counter spell, and you're doing against another blue deck. It's very much like that with Infect of, I'll try to kill your thing, you'll try to protect it, or you'll try to pump it, I'll try to kill it, you'll try to protect it. It's going to be a multiple stack thing is what you're trying to set up with Infect. So here we go. We got Might of Old Corrosa. Trying to see what the response is. Checking the number of cards in hand. There's 3. Didn't really do much there, so we said, okay, we can get away with a counter spell here. Help protect us. And there's the Distortion Strike. If you're going to play blue-green, I'm all about the Distortion Strike still being in lists. Unblockable is very relevant in a creature-heavy meta. Infect's just very difficult at my LGS. I would still like to bring it every so often and just be all right, do you guys remember how to play against this? I'm going to steal some wins off you. Or just get dumpster completely by Walking Ballistas coming out. And that's partly why I'm maybe I'll pivot off of it for a while and come back every so often. But, there's a lot of 1 damage stuff. I would love to see Infect get some love in a future set. Universes Beyond or Modern Horizons 4 eventually. We'll see what happens with it. But this is a very tough spot for the Infect player. You see another land in hand. They're already up to 5. They've already popped 1, so 6 lands, and they're running typically around 20 lands. Right? So that's not the spot that you want to be in as an Infect player. But we're still digging over here. Tune the narrative. Some players are running certain numbers of that. If you're going to be running the Jeskai Control, I push for it. In particular, having more draw spells are great. Having extra energy is great to use with Galvanic Discharge. And here's our big way to kind of try to close out the game. Our game ender here with Flage. We're going to pop this. ETB will Lightning Helix this for 3 damage, gain 3 life. And we'll have a response. So this is what we're talking about is the old school. Now, Become Immense used to be the way to end games when you're playing Infect. We're thinking the 2017, 2018 era of things. Even earlier than that too, right? But I occasionally will run a 1-of in my list, but that's about it. You don't want to go more than that because of scale up. Now, I don't know if this list is running scale up because I haven't been seeing as much in just the shuffle throughs, but a scale up here just could potentially kill us. All right, and we missed our life total. If you guys are paying attention, let me know. The Helix still goes off. We still gain the 3, but this is the downside of trying to do the edit and keep track of life totals afterward. We did a double setup for cameras this week and testing it out, so that was a big reason why we did not have the phone to keep track of light totals, but I got an idea for next time we go and do some recording. But here's our big escape. Let's get rid of 5 cards, escape it for a double red, a double white. Pop that guy. We're sweet. Elf is dead. And must have drawn another land, so we get the scoop up here. Yeah. Oh, he's running 2 Boseju's main board. I mean, so most of the time you aren't going to see that. Sometimes you will. Part of that also is adapting to your meta. Like we've talked about, is there are more Hardened Scales players or more artifact stuff. I mean, not as much now that summer's over and we have less players coming out on the weekly stage of things. But there's still always at least one Hardened Scales that you can be like, all right, there's probably a Hardened Scales player this week. But all right. Starting it off, 17 to a noble. So now this, you see that right away. Your kind of information is, all right, they very likely could have a Blighted Agent. We have to be aware of that and prepared for that with a opener like this. So we get to start off with another Surveil land. You'd love to be able to fetch those instead, but playing on turn 1 is perfectly fine, especially since we did not have an elf come out. Because there are turn 2 kills with Infect. So here's an elf, so no Blighted Agent, but an Ink Moth to follow it up. So slight variations, I would tap the noble instead of the land, just on the off chance something crazy happens, the noble ends up dying. It's just nuanced things that, like, from reps and repetitions of it, something crazy could happen. Where it's more likely people can interact with your creatures, less likely they can interact with your lands. So, all right, so we see a Distortion Strike to start things off. No other pumps, no other effects. Going for 3. And that's the thing, right? You doing this style of, all right, let's just do a little bit of chip damage. Push for 3. Don't do any pumps. Wait if your opponent responds, then you pump it again, right? You don't want to fight Infect in the middle of combat. You always want to do responses, you know, on your turn, on your end steps, your opponent's end steps. These periods where it's like, all right, how can I deal with you and not end up taking more damage in combat? So you want to find those windows of opportunity to be able to do it. All right, we've gotten 2 Surveil lands, but access to now double white or red or blue. So that's Hollowed Fountain. Start pinging ourselves down, which again could give us access to that Wrath of Skies. But we do have a Teferi here, which is, Teferi is such a annoying card. It was an all-star for me at the weekly there for just like, hey, all those stuff that you're trying to cast at instant speed, no, you cannot do that anymore. It's really good. So this is this weird opportunity window, right? So if this resolves, our plan here is to bounce the elf. Our opponent has 1 green, 1 colorless available to them. It's this weird situation. There is a Blossoming Defense in hand. So you could go for the Blossoming Defense now, but because you have the Ink Moth, like, it's okay, right? You don't want to waste a pump spell if you don't have to, especially a protection pump spell like that. So we do not see a... so we see Distortion Strike trying to get resolved, but Teferi prevents that from happening. Now, here's how things could work. With no elf or anything like that, you could be like, all right, I would like to activate Ink Moth, turning it into a creature, have Distortion Strike target the... Ink Moth Nexus, and then be able to swing in for extra damage there. That cannot happen because of Teferi, but that is one of the lines that you have to be aware of in fighting a Distortion Strike deck. All right, so the Rot Priest here is like, okay, is there going to be a land? Where are we at with it? Mutagenic. So we get another +2 pump. Also, because the Rot Priest, we get an extra Infect counter, poison counter, ticking up. That's what's so great about, like, if you're running Rot Priest, you want to run Mutagenic Growth, for things like this. So now, boom, boom, boom. There's the swing in, putting to 8, but not opting to try to kill the Teferi here. So that's that decision making here of, do you commit for it? Do you push? Do you try to take your opponent out? And you look at the Might of Old Corrosa in hand, we miss lethal, right? Assuming there was nothing to stop it, right? There was no force of negation. But so you have two options in that window, that opportunity. Go and kill Teferi so you can do a big explosion next turn, which I feel like is perfectly fine, right? You do the Rot Priest, you swing in with Ink Moth and kill Teferi there, and then you're safe. Don't use any pump spells. Save up for next turn. Now we're getting into it. We're going to try to close out the game. This puts to 9 Infect here, where we can't do any fighting over spells now. We have to do everything at sorcery speed, which allows me the opportunity to now respond. And because we still have our Teferi left alive, we can cast things that are normally sorcery speed at instant speed, like this Wrath of Skies, blowing up everything that's on the field. The Noble Hierarch, the Venerated Rot Priest, and the Ink Moth. If there was another mutagenic, we just die here. But there was not. So that's why it's like I like the blue-green Infect version a lot, because it's very good at let's do little chip damage and then have a big explosive turn and try to kill you. Teferi messes that up a lot, so we have to get that off the board as quick as possible. All right, uptick, pass and turn. And no other land drops, so that's the scoop up there. So really tough. Like, there was a lot of opportunities and chances for things could have potentially gone different ways depending on how things went. Doing a little de-sideboarding so you can see some of the stuff that I was able to bring in. It's not likely you're going to fight Infect, but there is the chances that it could show up, right? We know how things work. Players show up with different decks all the time. So here's a couple of the stuff that you can bring in. Just some weird interaction things. So, yeah, we take out a Subtlety, take out a Spell Snare, Spring Verdict, like the slower stuff. Things like the 2-drops that we're going to counter doesn't really matter there. So, I wanted to showcase this because we don't see Infect very often, but also just to kind of talk through some of the lines that Infect got to do. But and chatting with Adrian a little bit at the end there of like, hey, I wish I could do some YouTube stuff. And I was like, just start doing it. And this is for everybody else out there. Start doing. You want to do YouTube stuff? Do it. You don't need fancy stuff. Just, try it out. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching, everybody. We're going to have some more MTGO stuff coming up Saturday, and then continuing up with our Monday, Thursday release schedule for more commentary related to Modern. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching, everybody, and I'll see you all next game.